So it's person-centered planning in action. If you want to follow into our website to read more about this, if you get into inclusivesolutions.com, you'll find a button marked person-centered planning. Go in there and you'll find many more links about this kind of way of working. And if you want to tweet, @InkSouls will find us. And of course, we're on Facebook and LinkedIn also. Now, as we spoke about last time, there are many different approaches to planning that have been traditionally, from very service-centered thinking, very kind of medical model thinking and approaches. But the person-centered planning ways of working are very non-medical, very much the social model of disability. They arose out of North America and Canada, particularly in practical planning around people leaving long stay institutions, coming back out into the community. You've got John O'Brien, you've got John McKnight, you've got Jack Pierpoint, you've got Marcia Forrest, putting their brains into designing wonderful processes that are incredibly accessible for disabled people coming out into the community. The traditional stuff never was going to work. So as we get into this, as we get into kind of thinking practically, you'll see that all these tools and processes are wonderfully accessible. They're colorful, they always involve a graphic, they're kind of fun, they're playful, they involve the whole range of the arts. That's what I love about them. They involve drama, music, stuff happens, there's lots and lots of interaction, there's nothing boring about them at all. They're the very opposite of your traditional meeting. So just think of the most recent meetings you've been to in service land, and then compare it with this kind of way of working. You see, even in this image in front of you, you can see people are smiling, looking kind of energetic. They want to know what's going on. So, and very much this is the kind of the style of this more person-centered way of working. The kind of tools you're going to find in this world of person-centered working are maps and path. They're probably the gold standard of person-centered planning tools. They're group planning processes, and they overlap quite greatly. The maps has the kind of story so far element, and includes the word, the question around the nightmare for the future. Whereas the path process is all forward-looking, so it's very much thinking about where are things kind of going, always with this sort of dream question at the heart. The other phrase you can see there is essential lifestyle planning. More simply put, is it's kind of one-page planning, just one-page profiles. A much simpler way into this, which we'll touch on in a second. We mentioned this in the mindset piece when we met last, but I'm going to mention it again. Very important, constantly when we're even being very practical about this way of working, to hold these concepts in mind. We're trying to meet these ordinary needs. The young person's opportunities to contribute, to have choice and control in their life, to be able to go around in ordinary places. And if you're in lockdown right now, you know just how challenging that is when you can't go into ordinary places because of the coronavirus. You know, it really brings it home, isn't it, when you just can't move around freely in the usual places you'd like to go to. Being someone, just having that sense of identity, and of course a sense of belonging. And you'll see those threads running through all these practical processes which we're now going to be talking to you about. So hold them in mind. So we start off where we did when we were thinking about person-centered thinking. We start off with this notion of capacity and contribution, really, and how do you bring that into life? How does that kind of mindset, yeah, we want to focus on the child's capacity and contribution, but what does it actually look like in practice? That kind of mindset. So stories are going to help us, as they often do, don't they, when we're trying to understand something that's new. So I'm going to tell you the story of Stevie. Now, Stevie is 15 years old. He has severe learning difficulties. He attends a special school. He's He doesn't read or write. His attainments are all at a very, very early stage. He only speaks with a few words of language. He's always attended the special school, very complex needs. Now, his mum goes to a course, a bit like the one we're having in this session, and she comes back to the special school very fired up. Things have got to change. It's not good enough. He's got no friends. He's 15. He'll be leaving that school soon. He's horribly isolated. He knows nobody. She says he's going to have a work experience, she said, for starters. Got to have a work experience. And the school said, well, we're not doing work experiences this year, health and safety issues. Sorry, we'd like to, but we can't. He is going to have a work experience, she said. Whatever it takes, he's going to have one. So she's fired up. And she said, and the other thing they told me on this course, they said to me, you've got to find out what Stevie's gifts are and where they make sense in the world. That's what they told me on the course. So you tell me, what are his gifts? Now, the school immediately scratching their head. They didn't want to be tokenistic about it. They knew Stevie. He's got very complex needs. They were struggling. But if Stevie just walked in front of you right now, you met him, I'm sure you'd spot his gifts and contribution without any hesitation. Because Stevie's one of these disabled young men who's got a really big smile, kind of almost touching his ears. I bet you've met a young guy like this. Big smile. So when he walks in the room and smiles at you full on, it kind of lightens the room up. People resonate with the smile. It's wonderful smile. So this is obviously, this is what makes sense. So the question then came, well, where would that gift make sense in the world? Well, they scratched their heads and they thought about it a lot. Then they kind of came to the conclusion, well, the hospital, that's where we need him to be. People need cheering up in the hospital. But where in the hospital? Well, what about the oncology ward? What about the cancer ward? So that's where they placed him. They placed him in the oncology ward, and he would go along into the oncology ward, and I could picture very clearly there was 3 women, 3 beds, and he went up to the first woman in the first bed and he said, "Are you all right?" And she said, "No," she said, "I'm really ill, and I'm in a lot of pain." He said, "Oh, that's good then. That's good." And off he went. And the second day came, and he comes again. He goes up to the same woman. She obviously hasn't slept all night. She looks in a lot of pain. He goes right up to her and says, "Are you all right?" And she goes, "No," she says, I didn't sleep last night. He said, "Well, that's good then." And off he goes again. And this happened 7 days in a row. And interestingly, by the 8th day, as he approaches the bed, can you imagine what these women were doing as he approached them? Can you guess? Well, you're right. Of course, they were smiling, kind of half laughing. Is he going to say it again? And of course he does. "Are you all right?" And he carries on with exactly the same routine. Now, interestingly, on the 9th day, he's off ill. He doesn't go in. What do you think these women do? They complain. "Where's Stevie? We're missing Stevie. We're missing Stevie." So kind of interesting, isn't it, really? They missed him. As soon as he wasn't there, they missed him. He had this wonderful contribution just through his smile. That's Steve's gift. It made sense. But it wasn't truly present-centered because he had no choice and control over that. When they negotiated a bit with him about what he'd like to do in the hospital, he identified somebody in a uniform. That's what he wanted to do. Have the uniform, have the trolley, give out the packages. Well, as soon as he did that, he gave the packages all to the wrong people in the hospital. Everybody ended up with the wrong package because he couldn't read. He got confused about it. But the administrator of the hospital called in the deputy head from the special school and said, "Stevie saved us so much money, Every year I spend thousands and thousands of dollars to get people to speak to each other." Stevie managed it in 1 day. He got them all talking to each other. "I've got your package here." "Well, I've got your package here." "I'll come and meet you halfway down the corridor. We'll talk." So there it was. An unexpected outcome of thinking in a person-centered fashion. Choice and control and focusing on what he brought. Good old Stevie. He teaches us something. Now, Fascinating, isn't it? Fascinating. How about Elliot? What did you have a story on the same lines?
You're on
You
mute.
might have to unmute, Elliot.
Sorry. So this young man, he goes in bins and looks for empty cigarette packets, and he really, really loves looking for them for some reason. You know, he's just really attracted to them. And he's someone who carries the label of autism. So people see this young man going in bins, this young teenager, and they look down on him. You know, why is this kid going in bins? He's dirty. You know, he makes you think of negative stuff, right? When you think of people going in through the rubbish. So he's got this really good gift where he can find these from miles away, and somehow he can spot them from so far. So I've thought about it, and realized that his eyesight is really good. He's got like an eagle eye. So there's been multiple times where this young man has found money in the street, and he's been sort of on the top of a double-decker bus, and he's seen a £20 note wrapped up, and he's got off the bus while it's going really fast, and he's jumped off at the next stop, and he's ran back about half a mile back down the road, and he's found this £20 note, and he's like, yeah, I've got 20 quid. So he goes and spends it on, lottery tickets or whatever he wanted. And then the second time he found a credit card, and then he handed it in to the guy in the shop. And the third time he found a whole bag of cash, a big plastic bag full of cash in somebody's wheelie bin outside their house. And so he went and handed it in to them. He said, I've just found this bag of cash in your bin. And he's like, yeah, that's my wages. So he's like a taxi driver or something. He got paid in cash. So because of this gift, he was able to use his vision. So I was thinking, how can we utilize this gift? It seems to be pretty random, helping people out with, money. So we went to the golf course, and at the end of the driving range is like millions of golf balls, all in bushes and all in different places. So we went down to the bottom of this course, and we picked up 2 full big bags of golf balls, and we went right back up to the golf course and tried to sell them their own balls back. So it's quite an interesting way of sort of looking at that those cigarette packets, right, and thinking, oh, how can we use this, or how can we frame this in a different way and make it into a gift, or just look at it from a different angle. That's what I'm trying to say, really. Yeah,
it's fascinating, isn't it? So, in service land, we'd probably call that a mindless obsession, wouldn't we? That we probably need a program to sort of kind of somehow reduce that kind of behavior. But when we're being person-centered, we're going to catch hold of that and view it differently and see it as a potential for his contribution, for his capacity. Because we kind of, when you take that and see where that leads, well, that's a very interesting gift, quite unique, in fact, isn't it? To be able to spot that kind of detail. So fascinating to see where that could take him. Where do we need those gifts in the world? Now, a practical approach to kind of working with capacity are what gets called one-page plans. Or sometimes the full name is essential lifestyle planning, or one-page profiles. They also get called. They have 3 elements. This is the easiest thing you can do if you want to create a person-centered plan. This is super easy, and but it does respect the principles. So basically, working with the young person, child, adult, whoever you're working with to create this kind of planning, there's 3 kind of areas you're going to explore. What people like and admire about the person, and what's important to the person themselves, how best to support them, and that's it, really. There you get your one-page profile. And if the person themselves is able to can answer those questions for themselves, obviously start with them. The first question, what people like and admire, you nearly always need some input from a wider group of people. So that gives you some kind of idea about what that looks like. what people admire, what's important, what how best to support me. Here's a young man with Dazem Alfie. They've opened up a little bit more, really. Things people love about Alfie, things he's good at and enjoys, what's important to him, how to support him well. You can see there's a long list there, really. Here's another kind of format. This is quite nice. It's on a Word document. It's just in bubbles, and just the mum and the son created this together, Babu Basu. And it's interesting as well. He had an interesting story because he's another one, a young man with autism, who's really fascinated, real specialist interest, if you didn't call it an obsession, a specialist interest with dates, but also with astronomy, and the two going together, of course. It's quite interesting. The teacher turned what again could have just been thought was an obsession into a real positive by making him the birthday monitor. Isn't that a cracking idea? And then Mum bought the astronomy idea and thought, well, what about astrology? We can do a bit of astrology here. So whenever it's anybody's birthday, not only does he alert the teacher to it being their birthday, but he creates a little astrological kind of write-up for the young person. So again, not just a mindless obsession, a useful way forward there, really. But you see how nice this is as an overview of a young person. Supply teacher, cover teacher, working with Babu for the first time, can quickly read all about him, not trip up on something that could really be a problem for him, really. So he has a real problem when other children are noisy. That really can, or there's sudden noises, or things don't work that should work. These can really sort of trigger a big reaction out of him. So knowing that stuff quickly can really kind of help him. So that is a quick glance, a very practical approach to one-page planning. Sometimes these get turned into more of a kind of a child-centered review in a school setting. The headings can kind of be negotiated. They're not particularly set, usually based around those three elements I said at the start there. They can be on big sheets, they can be on flip charts. You can be pretty creative really about what they look like. But again, so it's quite friendly, it's quite sort of low tech. Yeah, and you can be creative around that. If you're with us on the last webinar, you remember this young man, so I do. I just wanted to again just show a little bit of the work we were doing with it, because this is a nice little example of using person-centered planning for transition. So here we can see one of our team guys, Louis here, as an inclusion facilitator, and he's creating. See the profile he's creating there. See the template shaped like a train. Well, the young man Saidu loves trains, absolutely loves trains. So you see the kind of train shape it was all set in there, really. And he was about to go into secondary school. So really, this is a perfect design, really, to create something, even in the visual form, that lent itself perfectly for transition. Moving on, because we've got quite a bit to cover here. This was a map process with a young man called Dan. This is his map here. Do you want to tell us a bit about this one?
Yeah, so Dan has got all his loved ones in the room. He's got his brother, his mom, his PAs, his stepdad, and he's non-verbal, and he communicates with maybe a little raise of his eyebrows. So it's very subtle, and it's very difficult to understand, what he might be able to communicate if you don't know him very well. So without all these people in the room, we wouldn't have been able to come up with such a beautiful dream and find out his life story and find out, his nightmare situation, and be able to figure out what his gifts and capacities are and talk about that. So this is a really powerful tool and map. So, but you have to have all the loved ones and all the right people in the room to make it happen.
Did he have a dream about a cafe, Elliot?
He did. His dream is to run a cafe called Dan's Cafe and make bacon sandwiches for people. It's a good dream.
Interesting, because a couple of these kind of care guys that work with them, they're real big cooks, aren't they? Aren't they? They're real chefs.
Yes. A lot of them they love cooking, and obviously that plays a big part of that dream. So they kind of they're on this journey with him really for life. I think they've definitely tied themselves to Dan for the foreseeable future, and so he's coming with them along that journey.
Yeah, marvelous. So there's Dan's map. You can see it's. And now, moving swiftly on, we're going to meet Zach now. Now, Zach is a young man in the care system. He's living in a children's home. He's actually 16 when we did this, but he doesn't want to be in this children's home. He wants to be with his girlfriend. Now, we assembled all the people who kind of cared about him or had known him for any length of time. It turned out that only the girlfriend had known him for over a year. All the professionals had known him less than a year, which is often the case we find in the UK with young people bouncing around the care system. I'm not sure if it's the same in Australia. In the States, probably is. Young people bouncing around, moving around the system. So the connections can be quite tenuous. But interestingly, despite the fact that only the girlfriend had known him for only a year, people were worried about her attending because she was in the care system too. There were concerns about her. But when it came to it, her contribution was so rich. So we started off doing some planning with Zach about what he wanted. And if you look on the right hand side, we were using the path process here, this big group planning. It was quite interesting, really. He immediately went to Jamaica. He was on a sandy shore. He was smoking. I'm not quite sure what he was smoking, but he was kind of relaxing, shall we say? And he was sleeping. He was fairly chilled out there, really. And that was pretty much it. So the top piece of that of the dream there, that was very much what Zach was giving us. And but interestingly, his girlfriend came in. She was much more practical about what she saw him doing. So he was a plumber, maybe a mechanic, maybe an electrician. We were forever negotiating back with Zach just to check in with him. Did that work for him? Yeah, that worked for him. He was very happy with those ideas. The idea that people were clapping and cheering when he got his qualifications that led him then on to be more independent, to have enough money, to be able to drive, do everything else he wanted to do with new friends. He was extremely happy about. So that was interesting, wasn't it? So that was all in his dream, a beautiful kind of dream there about his future. And we had goals towards that as well. But when we spoke about what it was like now is a long way from that. He's a young man who's all the professionals in the room, all they kept saying was he doesn't engage. If he engaged more, we could tick the boxes. If we could tick the boxes, he'd be able to move out of the home. Maybe he could move on, but he won't engage with us. That's their big frustration. So it's interesting, really. So that was their frustration with him. He kind of alluded to how difficult it had been living with his dad. Clearly, awful things have happened to him in the past. And really, most of his days spent sleeping. He spent a lot of time sleeping. Like a lot of time sleeping. I mean, the psychologist in me was immediately starting to think in my mind, is he just trying to block events out? He just doesn't want to even go together. But, when we're person-centered planning, we're not being psychologists. That's not the game here, really. We're not trying to theorize. We're not trying to go deep underneath. We're just letting it play out. We're letting the story be told, and we're dreaming, and we're setting goals. We're planning. We're not doing the other stuff. And so I kind of kept that at bay. So anyway, we ended up with a good kind of plan here, really. At the end of it, I was interested to know what Zach felt of the whole experience. So I asked him. Now, obviously, we can't identify him, so his face isn't going to appear on screen, but we've got his voice. So this is him. Now, he doesn't give me much, but he gives a kind of flavour about what he thought about the experience. So listen to Zach.
Think about having that part. That's all right. And there was anything hard about it?
No. It's pretty straightforward.
And do you think it will change your life at all?
Yeah.
What's going to change?
Everything.
Tell me about
All like pull my finger up my arse. Well, no, I said that on camera, but I don't care.
and what's going to change.
Just everything and anything, you know.
So what's going to happen tomorrow? We'll see, won't we? And would you recommend a path for somebody else?
Don't know, it depends.
Do you think it would help
If
somebody
they
else?
want to do it, they do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go get some food.
Bye then. Thank
See you
you.
later.
And off we went to McDonald's very rapidly. But it's quite interesting, isn't it? What's going to change? Everything's going to change. I was pressing him about tomorrow because it was an elaborate plan came out of the park for what would happen to get him back to college, because he hadn't been to college for about a year, and he was meant to be there. And so interesting, isn't it? So interesting. And the pull my finger out of my ass kind of words he comes out with, they're not exactly professional language, are they? Not the kind of thing you'd be typing into your report in service land, but he said it. That was language that meant something to him. Of course, he immediately turned to the graphicker and said, "Are you going to draw that then? Are you going to draw pulling my finger out my ass?" And she said, "No, but I am going to write those words now because they are his right. They're his words." And a very important point about when you're working in this way is to use the language of the young person. And that meant something to him. He knew exactly what that meant. And that young person did return to college, actually. Maybe not the next day, but in a few weeks' time, it worked for him. It did work for him. And there was more evidence engagement, which did allow him to progress in the direction he went to. So it was effective in that way. Now, another building block of a lot of person-centered planning, particularly maps, is this expression, the story so far. And in lots of young people's lives, especially if they've had traumatic experiences or difficult things have happened, we sometimes need to have the story told, because then we can draw a line around it, and then we can think about the future, then we can dream, then we can set goals for the future. And the same for organizations, and none more so than the awful events around the Grenfell Tower in London, which you'll have heard of, where many people were killed in this massive fire in this big tower block in London. We were asked to go along and use some group person-centered planning to help two of the primary schools that were actually at the base of the tower to kind of move on, really. So so I'm just wanted to tell you about that experience, because it's kind of interesting. And so this is me and Derek and I should say, who actually kind of ran the session. And this is the map we came up with in one of the primary schools. And as an aside, Elliot, do you think you could put your mute on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that okay, Elliot?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. So this was the overarching kind of map that we ended up with, and you can see the elements. You've got the story so far. You've got the dream for the future. You've got who are we. You've got gifts and talents. You've got what will it take, and then actions. They're the steps of the map process. So the staff, well, we had probably about 80 people in the room here as we did this. So it was a large staff. And so you can imagine, very emotional because of the journey they'd been through. But we tracked right back to way before the events. We went right back to 2008 as people remembered what had happened. We had people coming up in 2s and 3s, talking about what they remembered of those different years as time kind of went over. And then when we asked them to nominate who they wanted to speak about the events around the Grenfell Tower event themselves, and they nominated the head teacher, one of the deputies, a woman who was a teaching assistant, and a parent from the local community. They wanted them to kind of talk about that bit of the story. So they did talk about that bit of the story. I remember this was particularly striking coming from the head teacher, who was in tears as she told us this. It was devastating, still very hard to talk about it, but she'd never seen such human kindness. And it was so close to the summer when all this all had happened. So very, very powerful stuff. So it's said that the story is told, the traumatic stuff is told, it's kind of held. I mean, at the time, I'm running the process in this situation, so I'm listening like mad. All my attention is diverted to listening to the process, to containing and supporting. The graphica is just drawing out the key information, the key nuggets, and recording them. Colourful, but keywords. Not every single word that's said, but the exact words that's said, to kind of get a sense of that. And then you end up with this giant visual of the whole map. And it really is a map. Where they've been, a therapeutic line drawn, dreams for the future, the nightmare where they never want to go again, and especially who they are, gifts, and so on. And interesting, when we'd finished with the story, the energy around the dream was incredibly powerful, incredibly powerful. They were so wanting to move on into the future, really, and really, really do the best by the young people. So power of energy there, power of energy. So that was Beautiful Tower. So I'm just telling you that because it just shows that in a real high octane situation, these processes, these tools will still hold their own. They still hold their own. Obviously, many situations are not as high pressured as that one. Now, in the when we did the person-centered mindset, we spoke about this principle. That the child, the person with their family or the carers and friends are right at the center. They're always present. We're going to work very hard to make sure the person is present throughout the process, absolutely throughout the process. And you remember we just briefly showed you Millie last time as well. But I wanted to just return to Millie. This is in Grimsby, in the northeast of England. This was an annual review. So it's a legal process. So we were running the path process, the group planning, as an alternative to this legal process, because you can't just do this as an extra. You got to do it instead of things you're already spending your time doing, or you'll just frazzle yourself. You won't be able to do it. So we use the props, very important. Remember I brought the judge's wig last time. Here's the magic wand also. And here's Millie. Now, interestingly, the big issue with Millie was that everybody's worried about she won't engage. And the special needs coordinator in the school said, a group event, there is no way she will engage. But now look at person-centered planning in action right in front of you. She is surrounded by her best friend to her left, who also has learning difficulties out of interest. Millie herself has hearing difficulties, learning difficulties, and increasingly the school are worried about her behaviour. It's hard to believe, looking at her. To her right, these are not other friends, these are her sisters. And the sister on your far left is quite young, actually, quite young, probably about sort of five-ish, 5, 6-ish, so young. But look, in front of her, we have her mum, her dad, Auntie Brenda is present, and she absolutely loves Auntie Brenda, and some professionals. That's who's there for her. Why do you think it is that she is able to engage so well? Because as you can see, she's very engaged. As you look at that, just ponder on that question. Look where I am as the psychologist. I'm on my knees. Now, at my age, I don't really want to be on my knees for any length of time, but I will get on my knees for Millie and others because immediately it helps with the power balance, doesn't it? It's so much easier for her to talk to me when I'm lower and lower than her eye level. Much, much easier. Her comfort levels are increased by her holding the magic wand, by being flanked by her best friend and her sisters, seeing in front of her favourite auntie and her parents. That straight away makes things much, much safer for her. Behind her, you can see the graphica is writing everything she says, absolutely everything. And what she's talking about was all about sports. All her dreams were about sports in the future. And as you can probably read there, you know, hockey, rugby, cricket, football. She even says she wants to play for Manchester United. Now, the graphic doesn't turn that into what about Grimsby Town? That'd be more realistic. He sticks with it. He'll still put Liverpool up there. Because these are about aspirations. These are about hopes and dreams. The follow-up question will always be, what does that bring you? Because we're always after what's underneath that for the deeper values, the deeper content that question can bring. But for her, sport was just really, really important for her, really. And you can see there's lots of fun. They're enjoying it. At one point, she says Tesco's. You can see Tesco's down there. It's a big supermarket chain in the UK and elsewhere, of course. And now she says Tesco. Now I immediately say, what you mean managing Tesco, running Tesco? I'm like instinctively bigging her up around this desire around Tesco. No, just working in Tesco. And the more I asked her, the more I realized it was something about something else. It turns out Auntie Brenda works at Tesco's and she loves Auntie Brenda. This is about relationship. She wants Auntie Brenda in her life forever, really. And so no surprise that she reaches for Auntie Brenda and under the heading Tesco. When we ask her best friend what she would like from it, well, she says she wants her to be happy. And she says, friends. Anything else you want for her? No, just friends. So friendship is so important for Millie from her friend's point of view. And of course, she's so right, isn't she? She's so right. That is going to be a massive issue for her. So we carried on, and everybody got to say, parents got to speak. You can see you can notice we're on the floor for some of this. You know, that's quite interesting, isn't it? It's certainly not sitting around the table. There's a big wall graphic. We're on the floor. There's other props. See the brain there she's carrying there, and the brain to help us think about memories from the past. You can see, look at Dad's face. He's just rapt attention as Millie speaks. Absolutely rapt. He absolutely loved this process. He kept chipping in with his own memories of being at school and dyslexia and how difficult it was being at school. So comfortable in this meeting. So comfortable. And Millie again speaking and completely well engaged. Now, interesting, as we got towards the end of the meeting, some big questions were around here. The parents were wondering which secondary school to send her to when she leaves this primary school. There's a big special needs kind of style academy, and there's one that's big on sports. By the end of this, there was no question. It had to be the sports academy. The primary second special needs coordinator was also quick to say she can be the coach. We've got football teams coming up through the school here. She can be one of the coaches now, which was a fantastic catch, really, really good catch. At the very end of the meeting, when we kind of gathered around reflecting on how the process has gone, Mum starts crying. Mum starts crying in the middle of this. And Millie, of course, says, why is Mum crying? Why is Mum crying about this? Can you guess why Mum was crying? This is the first time Mum had been to a meeting so full of hope. Mum was used to going to meetings that were like battles. In fact, she told me this before the meeting even began. Whenever I have meetings with this school, it's always a battle. But interestingly, the school staff said exactly the same thing. When we have meetings with this Mum, it's always a battle. This wasn't a battle. If you get person-centered planning right, it flows in the same direction. We're planning together, and that's the spirit. And that is the spirit. And so they were all pleased at the end of this process, as you can see. There may have been tears, but they were pleased. So that was Millie's path in action. We spoke in the... So just to pause a second, Elliot, can we bring you in with the graphics, see where you're up to with that?
Here we go.
Can you show us the graphic as it is?
There you go, look.
Nice. So even today, you can see in our session, we have a graphic just coming to life here, as Elliot graphics it out, bringing out the key elements of the conversation. And if there were more people involved in the conversation, their voice would be there as well. It wouldn't just be my words. It would be whoever was speaking, and their words would come up. That's great, Elliot. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's fabulous. So now we're on to thinking a little bit more practically. This special needs natural supports. What does this look like when we're actually in action? Remember, we've talked about in service land, we're all about how many teaching assistant hours and so on and special supports. But in person-centered planning land, we're interested in the naturally occurring people who just happen to be in the young person's life. So obviously, thinking about Millie, that was Auntie Brenda, wasn't it? And her best friend and her two lovely sisters. In this situation, it was a special school. There were some challenges in this situation. And here was Fergus. Fergus doesn't use his spoken language to speak at all. In this picture, you can see who was assembled. Now we've got his brother and sister with the green jackets. They get some time out of their mainstream school. You've got his grandparents standing just under the clock there. Stepdad's there. Mum's crouched down. A person who runs a kind of a youth club that he goes to after school, sitting with the number 83 on the chest there, and the graphica to the far left, and some other people from the school. Now, really interesting in this, Fergus doesn't speak. Now, people always worry, you're doing this kind of person-centered planning where you're asking about dreams, but what about young people who don't speak? So in this situation, but what we always do is assume competence, assume there's understanding. Just the presumption is we just don't really know what's going on in Fergus's mind. And so often we don't. The majority of young people who cannot speak through autism, through what we broadly call severe or profound learning difficulties, we really don't know what's going on in their brains. If we're very honest about this, psychologists, neuropsychologists and the rest, we don't really know what's going on. So that we have these broad categories, these broad titles for them. So a safer assumption is to assume that maybe something is going on and one day we'll find a way of tuning in. So let's at least speak to them respectfully and wait and see what happens. And you'll be surprised in person-centered planning. I've certainly been surprised many times. In this situation, I asked all the dream questions. What would he dream of? Who would he like to be? Where would he like to be? Who would be with him in the future? And I just kind of waited. And I waited a bit longer. And then a quiet voice came out into the room. And it was his sister. You can see just standing behind him there. And she said, he's going to go to all the wonders of the world, to the Taj Mahal, to the Eiffel Tower. He's going to see them all. He's going to see them all. Well, when she said this, I looked around the room and there was barely a dry eye in the room. It had really touched everybody. She really caught something there for Fergus. Mum then spoke. The brothers spoke. When the granddad spoke, Fergus nearly jumped out of that chair. He was really shaking around. He loves that granddad. He absolutely loves granddad. And the young person over on the left there, with the 83 on the chest there, they said, well, you know what? I can see in the future, I dream that he's kind of working in a toy shop, and his job is to let people know which toys are exciting and interesting. If they keep him awake or not, they're probably worth having as a toy. If they're very boring and he falls asleep, they're probably very dull. I see him hanging around with co-workers in one of the breaks in the future. See, they'd really got it, hadn't they? They'd really got, coming out with those kind of expressions, they'd really understood what we meant by dreaming. So there it was, a lovely dream. And it also gives you a sense of who you might be gathering when you get those natural supports. And friends, having the presence of friends, you cannot underestimate. It's incredibly powerful, incredibly powerful. But sometimes it's not enough. We can ask the question, are there any friends? Is there some extended family? But sometimes there just isn't enough people, really. And we've developed the role of inclusion facilitator at Inclusive Solutions. And I've noticed some psychology services now are kind of copying that role, imitating it, and have created their own inclusion facilitators. It's more than a support worker, and certainly much more than a personal assistant. This is a much more enhanced role, which is a very active, almost kind of quite a pushy role for moving things on. So, Elliot, you are an inclusion facilitator. So, what would you say about it?
Yes, basically, I'd say the difference between it and a regular support worker would be that you're proactive in looking for places where this person is going to make friends and or going to benefit them in some way that they've identified. So you'd start it off with a path meeting where you'd identify the dreams and set goals, which means you've got like a direction to go towards, and it's all supervised by a psychologist as well. So when you do get a difficult situation, you've got someone that you can refer to and then think it through with. And so it's all really very focused and very, very quite intense. It's sort of a 12-week plan that we've put together for someone, and try and help them achieve their goals and get towards their dream.
Should we perhaps look at the video?
Yeah. Let's play that.
Do you want to set the context of the video, and I'll play it?
Yes. There's a couple of young people I was working with. So I've put some footage together and just tried to explain basically what inclusion facilitation is in a short video. So, yeah.
Inclusion facilitator acts as an enhanced mentor to the focus person, supervised by an educational psychologist over 12 visits. The job of the facilitator is to get the focus person closer to their dream by helping them achieve their goals, utilize their gifts, and hopefully make some friends along the way. Number 1, the path. A path is a planning meeting which was developed for use with disabled people at a turning point in their lives and who the traditional systems of support have failed. These are difficult conversations which the focus person usually gets left out of, which is why this way of working is known as person-centered planning. We ask the focus person what their dream life looks like and go on to their team what they would like to see for the focus person in their ideal future. We then set realistic one-year goals and move on to setting actions, i.e. this week, today, tomorrow. These meetings are designed to get everyone on the same page and make sure there are clear goals to aim for. Paths also help us get to know the focus person's likes and dislikes, which guide the next steps of the inclusion facilitator's input. The path is vital to the success of inclusion facilitation. Number 2, researching the local area, focusing on interests. After the path, the inclusion facilitator will do some community mapping, seeking the places in the local area with the highest potential for acceptance and meeting people with the focus person may get along with. This may be the local scouts or guides, it may be the local boxing or football club, it may be playing Dungeons and Dragons or joining a video gaming club. As long as it puts them in a purposeful situation with people who have similar interests, it's worthwhile. If the focus person is someone older, it may involve finding work or volunteering opportunities where they can rub shoulders with people around a shared goal or activity, as the majority of adult friendships are created in the place of work. Number 3, working with what you have. Inclusion facilitation is based on the idea of asset-based community development, ABCD, developed by John McKnight, which focuses on using the resources we already have available. In practice, this can mean looking for what the focus person can offer the community and finding a place for that gift where it will be useful and valuable. It also means looking for what facilities and groups already exist which may be of interest to the focus person. Inclusion facilitation requires a partnership with not only the focus person but also their families and the other important people in their life who know them well enough to see their value and potential. These people are valuable assets, and when the inclusion facilitation concludes, they are the ones who will continue along that journey with the focus person. It's very important to nurture these people and make sure they're on board with everything that is happening. Number 4, subtleties of intentional relationship building. Intentional relationship building is very delicate and requires patience, as all the inclusion facilitator can do is optimize the conditions for a potential friendship to happen. But it's up to the other people in the room to make that unconscious decision that they like the focus person and want to hang out with them. Humans are complicated creatures, and our relationships are too. nothing is ever black and white when it comes to friendship. Number 5, stepping back. Once some community networks have been established, the facilitator will begin to step back and allow what they have put in place to continue. This gradual process of stepping back includes handing the mantle over to the assets acquired during the process and reviewing the path with the focus person and those who care about them. Hopefully by this time, the focus person has accomplished most of the goals that were set at the path, are living a life that is closer to their dream, and most importantly, are using their gifts and capacities to benefit the local community so people can see their true value. If you would like to learn more about inclusion facilitation or know someone who would benefit from it, search for Inclusive Solutions.
Nice. So isn't that just the perfect example of person-centered planning in action and driving from the plan, the initial person-centered plan, the path, right into what's actually happening there out in the community with support, in this case, of an inclusion facilitator. Sometimes that's exactly what's needed. Anything you want to add, Elliot?
No, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, just yes. So, and then the final practical elements are forever thinking about connections and following through on possible connections, potential connections, and relationships. Obviously, particularly around when there's sometimes actually a need to build a circle of friends around a young person, which we did speak about briefly last time. This young man, if you remember, Jason. He has the label of autism, but he also picked up the label of stalker. So things were in a really bad place for him. We were able to build a circle of friends around him. And we needed that circle of friends, not just to get him back into school, but then when later on, this occasion took place. This was his path in year 12. So this is when he'd be... we'd be back at age 17, we were planning for his future. So we're using the path. The circle of friends all attended the very same circle that had allowed him to get back into school from having been excluded, and they supported him in his person-centered planning. So the link between circles of friends, those connections built around a young person, and effective planning. Sometimes the plan comes first, then the circle. Sometimes the circle, then the plan. In this case, it needed the circle first, and then the plan was able to follow. All of this has been graphicked throughout, as has our training session, and the very best person-centered plans usually have a very big, colourful graphic as part of them. So, Elliot, can we invite you again to show your graphic, please, that you've been creating for our session as we come to an end? And look at that beautiful graphic that he's managed to create just across the hour of this session. And we've found now we can run training sessions online, and obviously we can do person-centered planning online. With this quality of graphic, we could even run a path or a map session, and people could be with us online, and we could run this as well. You can see why. You can see how that would work. We can do the interaction. We can use the chat rooms. We can break the group down into pairs, into threes. We've already tried this out, and Elliot can put enough detail on this graphic to really capture a full-scale plan. So we're feeling really positive about this.